Hi everyone, welcome to a quick short video where basically at the end of every week I try and do a reflective session, usually for a couple minutes, where I sort of look at how the week's been that's just gone from almost like a third person perspective, and also sort of like compare that to my life and how I could sort of, how I could be better in my sort of family area, work area, whatever area I'm sort of looking on, or all of it, and how I can sort of rejuvenate, re-strategize, and take on the next week and its own challenges. And I usually do this by finding a Bible verse or a quote, any quote, whether it's a quote from someone famous or a quote from someone who's come up. If I feel like it's a good quote and it's very powerful, then I'll use it. And today we have a quote, which we'll get into in just a bit. So, I'm hoping that people maybe watch this video and you can relate to me. You get caught up in work, you get caught up in family affairs, whatever, and you just haven't had that time to yourself and you find yourself drained, exhausted. Hopefully, you guys are taking these couple minutes out, also make you think about things as well. So that's why I thought I'll make these videos hopefully consistently every week. Obviously, it depends if I'm training or whatnot, whatever I'm doing, but I'll try and do my best. So anyway, so today's one comes from a band called Stereophonics. I've never, truth be told, never heard never listened to their music, never heard it, but it was actually a line in one of their songs, a lyric, where it basically goes something like this: "You can get 1,000 matches from one tree, but it takes one match to burn 1,000 trees." Now, to give this some level of context, it's actually a very powerful message, but to give it some context, is that imagine those 1,000 trees as positive thoughts. Yeah, it could be not just positive thoughts. It could be reinforcements. It could be schedules. It could be routines. It could be that your work's going well. It could be that your finances is going well. You've paid off all your debts. You see where I'm going with all the positive stuff. But all it takes is one negative thought, one negative instance, one negative experience, one negative exposure, and could burn the whole thing down. And to me, this is actually really relates to my week. Obviously, burning everything down is quite strong, but you might burn down half or a quarter. It's still an effect that could have, well, an effect on you. So let's just imagine that those 1,000 trees are all your positive stuff, whether it's, experiences, whether it's life, whether it's, routines, whatever. So how does this relate to me in this week? So truth be told, I've been extremely struggling this week, especially with home life and things like that. Every relationship, every home life has their own struggles. I'm not going to be naive. I'm not going to be one of these people like, yeah, we're all fine. We have our struggles. Everyone does. And it's just hit me the hardest this week. And I think that a lot of my trees, if we use that analogy, was absolutely scorched. And because I was so caught up in it, I didn't have that time to sort of try and find a way to put out the fire. I was focusing on work. There's been different things at work that I've had to get used to, and this and that, and it's just I haven't had time to really sort of focus on it. Or I did have time, but I just weren't very aware of it. Whatever the case may be, and I and I found that a lot of my positive thoughts, my sort of routines, my sort of strength was sort of just getting burned down, if you will. And this really quote talks about resilience. It talks about discipline as well. It's about having that discipline to, even when you have a negative thought, you just have that shield, you have that pushback effect, where, maybe inevitably you're going to get trees burned. Again, you're using that analogy. However, you're able to mitigate it, you're able to quarantine it and prevent it from spreading across the whole thing. And that's something that I failed with quite epically this week. So, now reflecting on it, I've sort of wish I did this, I wish I did that. And, I'm not going to get into anything too personal because, again, I wanted to keep it to help you guys as well, but just to give some level of context to how it's related to me. So, I've been sitting there, I've been thinking for the past bits, what I'm going to do next week, how I'm going to approach it, what am I going to do? These are the things, the questions that I ask myself, and hopefully you guys can ask yourself. So maybe you can relate. Maybe you're at work, or maybe you're in training if you're in the military. Maybe you've had some struggles at home, whether it's relationship struggles, it could be work struggles as well. Again, every week's different. Every week has its own challenges. Some weeks are easier than others. Some weeks are obviously way harder. So, it's good to take that time out. Maybe you can sit and think, do you know what? Yeah, I was so caught up in this, that, and I let this slip. And, it's a good self-reflection. It's about being self-aware as well. It's a very positive reinforcement on yourself because, again, if you start looking at things, what you can do differently, ignoring what other people do, there's a great saying. I was going to say one saying, I'm probably going to say 5 or 6 now, but it's very relevant to this. Basically, it's 90% of what happens to you is out of your control, but 10% is in your control and actually dictates the outcome. That's a very powerful message. This almost shows that even though the huge portion of what's happened to you is not your fault, a big concentrate, 10% concentrate can, decide everything. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So yeah, that's really going to be the end of the video. Again, I wanted to keep it short, precise, because that's what I usually do, keep it 5 minutes or so. But just to conclude it off, a great way to you don't have to just use that quote. It could be a Bible verse. It could be listening to music, whatever your things. I just like looking at quotes. I like studying history and stuff. So obviously looking at influential figures throughout the years. Not just that though. If I see a quote online I like with the Stereophonics, never heard of them before. I thought that's a really powerful message, and I think that's a good one to talk about. So yeah, hopefully you guys have found that useful. And if you want to put your own ones down in the comments, what you've been doing. Again, it's all about helping people get through that week, reflect. Don't beat yourself up if you knew you've had a shit week and you reflect on it and you go, do you know what? Yeah, I could have done this differently, but now I'm aware of that. I'm going to tackle that next week, see what happens. And you might, who knows, you might be on a streak of weeks upon weeks upon weeks of just being negative, 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 either the same or sort of similar or totally different, regardless of what it is. But now you've had that time to stop and sort of put the shield back on, put the reinforcements, the hand to push back. You're able to actually go to next week and be a little bit better, hopefully a lot better, but even a little bit better is better than not at all. So yeah, hopefully you guys found that useful and enjoyable, and I will see you in the next one, whenever that is. Take care. Bye bye.